There's no thrill like discovery. The Discovery Channel. Explore your world.
Imagine a world where you can lift 900,000 pounds. Imagine a world where the lakes are made of liquid natural gas. Imagine a world where a single volcano is larger than all of the Earths combined. Imagine the moons of our solar system. Once, we thought the 9 planets were the ultimate destinations. But when we actually went to visit them, we couldn't help but become captivated by what lay just next door, the moons. 95 different worlds, now known to hold the most exotic real estate in the solar system. Moons where geysers shoot as high as Mount Everest, where a single cliff is 8 times deeper than the Grand Canyon. And all you need to do to fly is flap your arms. Moons where you can explore the first water ocean ever found off of planet Earth. You can hunt for life in what may be the best place to look for life in the solar system. So prepare yourself for an extreme ride as you explore and even search for life on the moons, the 95 worlds of our solar system. Neptune, a ball of gas 60 times larger than Earth. Like the other gas giant planets, Neptune has no surface to even land on. If we want a place to explore, we'll need to look to the moons. Here, nearly 3 billion miles away from Earth, is the coldest moon ever recorded. At almost minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit, it approaches absolute zero, the temperature where all movement stops. If any moon should be a frozen ice ball, it is this one. Yet instead, it is a world in full motion. Dynamic. Active. One might even say psychedelic. Welcome to Triton.
Triton is the largest moon of planet Neptune. On the very distant fringe of the solar system, with its extreme conditions, exotic composition, and bizarre geologic processes, Triton is an absolutely surreal world.
On the coldest moon in the solar system, there are geysers, volcanoes. The frozen surface is alive.
It has one of the most dramatic displays of volcanic terrains in the solar system, which sounds surprising perhaps because ice ball, volcanism, they don't seem to go together. But in fact, Triton's form of volcanism involves molten ices.
Here on Triton are the first ice volcanoes ever found. The volcanoes start deep underground, where Triton's weak internal heat turns ice into liquid. Less dense, the liquid rises to the surface, creating an explosive eruption that showers the moon, not with melted earth, but with melted ice. The cold, slushy lava forms an utterly fantastic ice-sculpted landscape. Even more surreal than volcanoes made of ice are Triton's powerful geysers. On Earth, geysers are made of boiling water. On Triton, geysers are made of boiling nitrogen. As bizarre as it seems, with nitrogen, you can have a boil at 320 degrees below zero. So cold, everything familiar to us shatters like glass. And yet so volatile, it can produce the highest geysers the solar system has ever seen.
Standing on Triton, we would want a pressurized and heated spacesuit given the conditions there. If you were dumb enough to go out of your spacecraft on Triton without a spacesuit, your head would explode in about 3 seconds flat, and then you'd freeze to 390 degrees below zero. Your body would be hard as steel. Standing on the surface, we would experience 1/12 of Earth's surface gravity, so we would feel very light and buoyant. We'd be able to jump 12 times higher, for instance, than we could on Earth.
And for the truly brave, a new sport, geyser diving.
It might be very interesting to go down into the holes, if you dare. There'd be all sorts of reverberations with the supersonic gas rushing out. We may end up in a pool of liquid nitrogen, boiling fervently.
As nitrogen boils, it produces a vapor that expands hundreds, even thousands of times in volume. Intense pressure builds until the geyser finally gives. The explosive force shoots 10 times faster than any geyser on Earth. When it reaches 5 miles high, about the height of Mount Everest, the geyser, darkened by carbon, is sheared at a right angle by Triton's high-altitude winds. If you didn't know better, you'd think this moon had smokestacks. Once, scientists assumed the outer moons would be cold, dead, and boring. Now we know that even 3 billion miles from the sun, in the shadow of Neptune, you can have a startlingly beautiful world in motion. And if the coldest moon can be this active, just imagine what the other moons have to offer. Orbiting Jupiter is the hottest moon in the solar system. Scientists once thought there could be little warmth 500 million miles from the sun. But here, the gravity of Jupiter and its other inner moons squeeze, bend, and twist this world until it heats up like a furnace. This is a world of erupting molten rock and poison gas plumes. This is a world so hot, it is melting before our eyes. This is Io. Your trip to hell.
The surface of Io is an extraordinarily inhospitable place. To an unprotected human on the surface, the first problem would be the lack of a breathable atmosphere. And there's always the danger of being caught in a massive volcanic eruption.
We will brave Io's hell to visit some 300 active volcanoes. The #1 attraction will be Io's old faithful, Prometheus, a constant plume that sends a tower of poison gas 50 miles high. There's Loki, the largest volcano in the solar system. Scientists still don't understand its structure, but it generates more heat than all of the Earth's volcanoes combined. and Amirani, 300 miles of oozing lava, the longest active lava flow in the solar system. Io produces 45,000 tons of lava a second, enough to pave all of the Earth's continents every year. It is hot, runny, fast-moving lava.
Lava on Io would flow like olive oil, and you couldn't outrun it. You could possibly ride a bike and get away from it on a bicycle if you could ride fast enough.
And if you had a mountain bike, you would take the ride of your life. For Io has mountains twice as high as Mount Everest. You'd need warm clothing, for away from the volcanoes, Io is more than 200 degrees below zero and full of snow. Take your bike near a searing lava flow, and you'd be burned on one side and frozen on the other. And where the hot lava hits the cold snow, you'd see a magnificent plume shooting up to 250 miles into the frigid darkness of space. When the plume cools, it returns to the surface in a sulfur snow. Like a kaleidoscope, the sulfur changes colors with temperature and impurities.
Io is covered in red and brown and yellow and even green. It must be quite extraordinarily beautiful.
On the molten world of Io, one thing you'd want to do is study the lava, how it erupts and how it cools. That's what these scientists are doing here at the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii. And if you could, what you'd really want to do is stick a thermometer right in a lava flow.
About 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a typical temperature here in Hawaii, but on Io we expect lavas to be about 500 degrees hotter, and that's something we haven't seen on the Earth for billions of years.
Io has the hottest lava in the solar system, over 2,600 degrees. The last time this temperature was seen on Earth was 3 billion years ago, when our planet spilled at least 4 times as much lava as it does today.
So Io's a chance to go back and look at the types of lava flows that have been dead from the Earth. So it's like Jurassic Park for volcanologists.
We will want to visit Io, but the risks are immense. It's not just the volcanoes. Here, Jupiter showers the moon with radiation 4,000 times the lethal dose. But scientists may have found us a safe home. Underground.
The main obstacle to successful inhabitation of Io by humans is overcoming the high radiation environment. And probably the best thing to do would be to seek refuge underground, perhaps in something like this, a lava tube.
Io may be studded with empty lava tubes, basically old plumbing from its dormant volcanoes, and the rock above will act as a radiation shield. Keeping our exposure to a minimum, we would emerge from the lava tube for brief excursions, and we would look up to see one more surprise, the grandest light show in the solar system.
If I could be standing by a lava flow on Io and looking up at the sky, what I would see would be glowing volcanic gases, very much like the northern lights on Earth. It would be truly spectacular.
The aurora are created when sulfur dioxide gas ejected from the volcanoes strikes charged particles emitted from Jupiter. Gas hitting electricity, forming a gigantic neon light. It's one more reminder that the 95 moons hold the most exotic real estate in the solar system. The 95 moons give new meaning to the term extreme sports. You could say the pioneer was Alan Shepard, who in 1971 landed in the ultimate of sand traps. With a one-handed swing, he drove a golf ball almost 200 yards.
Miles and miles and miles.
Of course, Tiger Woods could have sent the ball almost a mile. Now, the only limit to lunar sports is our imagination. Imagine snowboarding on Saturn's Enceladus, where ice volcanoes create the best powder in the solar system, and the slopes offer an unforgettable view of Saturn's rings. Imagine jet skiing on Saturn's Titan. No need to bring fuel, for the lake is made of liquid natural gas. Of course, if there were oxygen, there's no smoking allowed. The lake would go up in flames. Imagine rappelling on Uranus's Miranda down a cliff nearly 8 miles high, 8 times the depth of the Grand Canyon. If the rope breaks, you won't hit the ground for a full 9 minutes. Imagine scuba diving on Jupiter's Europa in the first water ocean found off of planet Earth. Keep your eyes open for alien creatures. After all, it was in an ocean where the only life we know got started. Lunar sports may seem like science fiction, but there are already plans to visit a playground of a moon called Phobos. The next world humans may land on is not the one you think. When we head to Mars, we'll likely trek to one of its 2 moons. Tiny Deimos, or a slightly larger speck of a moon called Phobos. Its size and low gravity makes stopping here cheaper, safer, and easier to visit than the Red Planet. This rock the size of Houston, looking more like a potato than a sphere, may be our next home in space.
Phobos is one of the smallest moons, and a real lightweight. The surface gravity there is less than 1,000th of what it is on Earth. And that means a human being on Phobos would weigh about as much as a mouse does on Earth.
Weighing only a few ounces, we wouldn't walk on the surface. We'd float. But you need to be careful. There's a layer of fine dust 3 feet deep. Kick it up by mistake, and you can't see a thing.
Phobos is a very dirty place. The soil there is very dark. It's as dark as charcoal. This soil is created as meteorites bombard Phobos over the years and fragment the surface rocks into this powder and rocky soil. If we're not careful when we go there, we may stir up this stuff, and it's going to make a mess of everything.
Drifting over small, sharp craters, the shadows change rapidly as the sun rises and sets every 8 hours. With darkness, you'd feel the temperature drop 200 degrees to a bone-chilling 170 degrees below zero.
Because of the really low gravity on Phobos, you could have some pretty extreme sports. Even a pretty average pitcher, without trying too hard, could take a ball and throw it completely into orbit around Phobos. After about 20 minutes, after completing a whole orbit, the ball might come back at you from the other side of the moon. Baseball would be really interesting.
And it's not just baseball. Imagine the Phobos Olympics. The champion weightlifter here could hoist over 900,000 pounds, the weight of a fully loaded jumbo jet. A gymnast could complete 3,000 somersaults before hitting the ground 25 minutes later. And a high jumper can go a mile into space. The gold medal winner here will fly off Phobos and into orbit. In effect, he will become another moon. When you're done playing, you'll want to explore the strange parallel grooves, their origin a mystery. And all the tourists will be flocking to the giant Stickney crater, 7 miles wide. Put a crater this scale on Earth, and it would be larger than the United States. This gaping hole at Arizona's Meteor Crater pales in comparison.
This is an immense crater on Phobos. Standing there must be an impressive sight. It's 7 miles wide. I'm not even sure your eye could really take in the vista itself. It was blasted out of the west side of Phobos when a small asteroid, maybe twice as large as a football field, slammed into Phobos at about 14,000 miles an hour. Phobos is a feisty little survivor. Had the impactor been just a little larger, Phobos wouldn't be there.
A hair bigger, the impact would have shattered the moon. Instead, the collision started a tremendous shock wave that stirred the inside like a blender.
A huge shockwave blasted through the small moon in about 10 seconds, completely rubblizing the interior of the moon. So, even if Phobos been a solid piece of rock before the impact, it was completely rubblized afterwards. It created a lot of void space and a lot of cracks and blocks inside of Phobos. And today those may be manifested as small, if you would, caves inside of Phobos.
Studded with caves, Phobos offers another extreme sport, spelunking. These caves will be natural homes, protecting visitors from meteor storms and deadly cosmic rays. Emerging from our home, we'd look up to see Mars, looming in the sky a mere 4,000 miles away, no further than New York is to London. You can think of Phobos as a space station orbiting Mars. You can take quick trips to the red planet, but return to the security of a protected home, away from Martian dust storms. In our lifetime, we may see humans peering at Mars from a small speck of a moon called Phobos. There is one thing that all the moons have in common: craters. From our pockmarked moon to Jupiter's Callisto, the most battered body in the solar system. With most having no atmosphere to protect them, our 95 moons are the solar system's shooting gallery. Here at NASA Ames, they are recreating craters with this giant cannon, 20 feet long.
This gun is the only gun like this in the world. It's one of the fastest guns in the West. This gun can fire something that will go almost 20 times the speed of sound, almost 4 miles per second, if you can imagine that. This little projectile is what we're going to be firing, and it really packs a wallop. When this thing hits, there's nothing left. And that's basically what we're going to try to simulate, making believe it's a mini asteroid that's going to be colliding with the moon.
Peter Schultz's work captures the birth of a crater. He can change the angle of the cannon, and he can fire at different materials. Today, he's taking a low-angle shot to try to decipher a series of strange craters on Mars. He'll fire at a metal block.
On Mars, we find these oblong craters. They're so oblong that they must have been formed by an exceedingly low angle. Very likely, these are indicating that they decayed out of an orbit, and this is simply a record of lost moons that have collided Mars.
Schultz believes these low-angle craters are basically skid marks created by the demise of some 200 moons that slipped out of the orbit of Mars. Mars is a moon destroyer. Better get to Phobos soon, because it's doomed. In the next 40 million years, this tiny moon will join the 200 others and come crashing into the surface. Schultz will now try to recreate a giant crater on our moon using a small glass sphere. He tries a variety of angles. Only one, a glancing angle, creates the crater without destroying the sphere. This fracture is remarkably similar to South Pole Aitken, the largest impact crater in the solar system, so big that it covers 15% of the surface of the moon. If the angle had been only a few degrees different, our moon would be history.
All the moons probably are lucky survivors from that last big impact. When you look at each one of these moons, you see these big impact basins that occur on them. If they had been a little bit bigger, or if they'd taken a more direct hit, they would have been blasted to smithereens.
We once had hundreds, perhaps even thousands of moons in our solar system. Our 95 worlds are the lucky survivors. It took Columbus almost 3 months to sail to the New World. The quarter-million-mile voyage to our moon only took 3 days. We used relatively primitive technology, like computers with less power than today's pocket calculators. But in a brief burst of exploration, we proved that we have the know-how to visit another world. Apollo 17 astronaut Gene Cernan.
You get down, and then all of a sudden you get close, and your engine starts stirring up all this dust. Perhaps the most quiet moment in my entire life, when all of a sudden all the dynamics stopped. And we landed on a surface moon and looked out there, and there was silence and stillness. And we were on another world. We were now seeing what has never been seen by a human being since the beginning of time.
As I step off at the surface at Taurus Littrow.
Cernan is one of only 12 humans to ever walk on another world. What he finds is a stark, airless, alien landscape.
Realizing they're standing in sunlight, surrounded by the blackest black that man can conceive in his mind, and there is the Earth sitting in the middle of that blackness. Now that's a paradox on Earth, surrounded in sunlight, surrounded by blackness.
Man, I tell you.
With only 1/6 gravity, astronauts struggle.
This isn't working out too well.
You know, that's what you call getting down into your work.
Now that I got it.
Jack Schmidt having a few problems.
Dadgummit.
Until they find a whole new way to get around.
Somehow our computer tells you that to get from one place to another, it doesn't make sense to walk. We hopped.
This is the best way for me to travel.
I would skip down the sides of some of those hills like a little kid. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, we used to skip. It just didn't make sense to walk.
Some kind of different ride.
The astronauts collect the oldest rocks ever found.
Holy smoly!
Some as old as 4.5 billion years.
Here's a football-sized rock that was...
They are strangely desert dry, as if you took an Earth rock and roasted it until all the water boiled away. In the safety of the lunar lander, Cernan examines these roasted rocks with all his senses.
One of the things that hit me very quickly was that they smelled like spent gunpowder. just like you fire a shotgun or even a rifle. Very familiar.
The composition of these rocks leads to a bold theory. Our moon was born of our Earth. Scientists now believe that 4.5 billion years ago, an object the size of Mars crashed into the Earth, releasing unfathomable energy. The collision ejects over 70 trillion tons of rock into space. The debris coalesces into a fiery, molten world, creating the desert dry rocks, as well as volcanoes and oceans of lava. Eventually, the moon cools, hiding all but traces of its cataclysmic birth.
Oh, hey!
On this overpoweringly gray world, Cernan helps discover a glimpse of color: orange soil.
I've stirred it up with my feet. Hey, it is! I can see it from here. It's orange.
Cernan is transported back in time, for the soil is made of orange volcanic beads almost 4 billion years old, the remains of an ancient volcanic fire fountain. They are a reminder that this seemingly dead world had a fiery birth. On December 14th, 1972, Gene Cernan leaves the moon, the last man to ever visit another world.
America's challenge of today has forged man's destiny of tomorrow.
His voyage is proof that we have the technology and the courage to visit the moons. And if we could get to our moon using technology now 30 years old, imagine where we can go next. Saturn, a giant ball of gas 800 times larger than the Earth, enveloped by its majestic rings. The rings are probably a moon graveyard. The millions of fragments, the remains of long-destroyed, fractured moons. And 700,000 miles beyond the rings is the largest of Saturn's moons, Titan. Titan is shrouded from view by miles of haze, a smoggy atmosphere unimaginably worse than a bad day in Los Angeles. The surface of Titan has never been seen. But infrared studies suggest that when we break through the atmosphere, we will find a world strangely familiar. For nearly 1 billion miles from Earth is a moon that looks like home.
Welcome to Titan, the coolest moon in the solar system. It's got lakes, mountains, and oceans.
Titan may look like Earth, but the lakes are made of liquid natural gas, a chilly 300 degrees below zero. It's so cold it will freeze your skin right off your body. But with the right suit, you could have a blast, swimming in a world with just 1/7 the gravity of Earth.
The great thing about swimming on Titan is because the gravity's low, you could pull yourself clean out of the water like a dolphin.
Imagine swimming like a dolphin in a lake of flammable natural gas, 1 billion miles from Earth. But you ain't seen nothing yet.
One way to explore Titan would be by balloon. Because unlike any other moon in the solar system, Titan has a thick atmosphere, and that makes it possible to fly.
An atmosphere means that Titan has sky, clouds, wind and weather, and air in which to float. In fact, NASA already has a balloon design. and plans are in the works for a plane and even a helicopter. Within 50 years, there may be a balloon floating on another world. But on Titan, we can achieve the ultimate dream in flight.
In fact, the air on Titan's so thick and the gravity so low that all a human being would need to fly is a small pair of wings.
Using a set of wings only 10 feet across and powered only by our muscles, we can soar like a bird. We can climb into clouds of natural gas. When the clouds get too heavy, they release a downpour. On Titan, it doesn't rain water, it rains fuel. The drops, twice as large as on Earth, fall like snow. The petrochemical rain erodes the landscape, creating a mirror image of Earth, of valleys and hills, and filling the lakes with an explosive mix.
If there were oxygen on Titan and you struck a match, the whole place would blow up.
A deafening roar has enough fuel to power the Earth for 50 million years, goes up in flames. To explore the 95 moons of our solar system, proper dress is required. Here at NASA's Johnson Space Center, they are outfitting the astronauts of the future.
This is called the Mark III spacesuit. It is very possible you might see something like this on the surface of the moon or other worlds at some point.
The first goal of a spacesuit is to provide a completely sealed environment. For in the vacuum of space, we need air pressure. Otherwise, the fluids from our body will bubble off until we're literally freeze-dried like a piece of beef jerky.
It's just a big balloon shaped like you that lets you move and keeps all the gases inside, in this case oxygen, to allow you to breathe and live. If you didn't have that, your body fluids would literally fizz or boil off like when you open a soda can. Your body fluids would fizz, and I don't like that happening very much to me anyway.
On the moons, we're going to need mobility. Ball bearings help mimic our own flexibility. Kevlar, the same material in a bulletproof vest, keeps the suit strong enough to protect against a fatal tear. Moving around, the body can usually produce enough heat, as long as you trap the warmth inside.
And what we do is use what we call multi-layer insulation. A layer of mylar and then a layer of vacuum, and a layer of mylar and a layer of vacuum. In this case, there's 5 layers. It works like a thermos bottle works and keeps you very well insulated.
With a suit designed on these principles, most of the 95 moons can be our playground. But the moons of Jupiter will offer a major challenge, for Jupiter is a nuclear furnace that showers these worlds with a lethal dose of radiation. We'll want to figure out a way to survive here, because one of these moons may hold the first ocean and the first life found off of planet Earth. "95 moons, each one offering a strange alien surface to explore. But in the shadow of Jupiter, there is one world that offers the ultimate possibility. The possibility of life. This moon is a small icy outpost called Europa. Our sun, a 500 million miles away, offers little more heat than a distant match. Europa is cold and desolate beyond imagination. On the surface, it is the last place in the solar system to look for life. But break through the ice, and there may be the first ocean ever found off the planet Earth. The first new ocean since Balboa discovered the Pacific in 1513.
I think the biggest surprise would be that a moon could have an ocean. An actual ocean that could be an environment suitable for biology. That's a real mind blower.
If I were to bet on one or the other, I would think that life would be more probable currently on Europa than on Mars.
I think to stand on Europa would be, to me, one of the most profound experiences of my life. It would be a place that might, under our feet, harbor life.
Europa will be a challenge to visit. Here, Jupiter rains a vicious hail of radiation that cooks the living like a microwave, and temperatures hover at 250 degrees below zero. To explore Europa, we will need something like a tank.
So this special vehicle for exploring Europa is going to have to be lead shielded to protect me from the radiation. I'm going to need a regulated atmosphere, plenty of oxygen to breathe, CO2 scrubber to remove what I breathe out, and I'll have to have a good supply of fuel, both to keep me warm and to properly explore this amazing place.
Europa's road is a bumpy one. There are 300-foot ice ridges that form a towering wall, and at the bottom, ice boulders block the way. You may not realize it, but you are driving on top of an ocean. Driving on a frozen ocean through a maze of tortured, jumbled ice as hard as concrete. Better drive carefully, for deep, dangerous cracks may be opening below your vehicle.
Some of the cracks on Europa extend for 1,000 miles across the surface. In fact, some of them would go as far as from Los Angeles to New York. And as they propagate, they go along at about 3 miles an hour, just about the same speed as a person walking.
Europa is riddled with cracks deeper than the Empire State Building. Walking along, you might look in and see the ocean water rising from below.
On Europa, Jupiter exerts tidal forces that distort the whole body, so the whole moon gets stretched. When that happens, the surface gets stressed, pulled, and cracks initiate. So you might have a crack like this on Europa, and it'll open and close every day, day after day.
Jupiter's tug is stretching and squeezing the inside of this moon, creating enough heat to melt underground ice. The melted ice forms a subterranean ocean, and warm water rises to the surface. On Europa, you can visit not just the first ocean, but these, the first icebergs ever found off of planet Earth. You are now on a journey to the closest place on Earth to Europa. It is the icy, frozen Arctic Ocean.
Everything we see on Europa has to do with there being a liquid water ocean under the ice. And that's what this place is all about also. Here we're on a solid surface, but just below us is the ocean.
Scientists are coming here to the Arctic, searching for clues to the ultimate question. Is there life on Europa? For if we can find life in this extreme environment, then we have a chance to find life on another world.
It represents, this frozen Arctic Ocean, just a spectacularly extreme environment that allows us to explore and test the limits of life on this planet, which therefore allows us to think about the limits of life elsewhere, or if it's even possible to have life elsewhere.
In the frigid Arctic, Jody Deming and Hayo Aiken search for the very limits of life. They drill into the ice, its temperature 20 degrees below zero, a temperature at which no living organism has ever been found.
Well, the most sophisticated way to look for life in these samples would be to take a section here unmelted and put it under a microscope in a cold room that's at this temperature, stain it with a DNA-specific stain so that the bacteria light up for you, and then voila, there they are.
You are looking at living, breathing bacteria, found where no organisms should exist, in a place as close as we can get to Europa.
If I'm honest with you, I'm never surprised by what microorganisms are doing on this planet. They really have to be expected to do more than we ever think they're going to do. We have certain preconceived notions about what's too hot, what's too cold, what's too acidic, what's too. But every time we look and push a limit further and further, we find microorganisms happily perking along under those conditions.
With life thriving in the harsh frozen Arctic, it's possible, perhaps even likely, that Europa's saltwater ocean, protected from deadly radiation by a layer of ice, will be home to the most profound discovery of all time.
In an environment like this, where you'd have a crack and water coming up and down every day, I could imagine several kinds of critters. You could have some things that hang in on the edge of the cracks. They'd want to be a few centimeters down to be safe from radiation, but as long as they're within a few feet of the top, they would get enough sunlight for photosynthesis. Other organisms might want to float with the water and just come up near the top sometimes, and then, next day go on back down and just ride up and down with the soup.
Soon we may know if Europa harbors life. NASA scientists are currently designing a probe called the Cryobot to explore Europa's ocean. The Cryobot will land on the surface, but that's just the beginning of its amazing journey. For it will fire up a nuclear heater and begin a slow descent through the ice. Melting at a rate of 75 feet a day, it may take 6 months to make it through the thick ice. Like something out of a James Bond movie, the Cryobot will split open, and a submarine armed with a remote camera will emerge into an ocean bigger than all of our oceans combined. The Cryobot isn't science fiction. It is a current NASA research project. And within 50 years, we may be piloting a submarine looking for life on another world.
When I talk to my friends about hunting for life on another planet, they always imagine Klingons or something like this. I would be satisfied with slime mold. That to me would be one of the most profound discoveries we've ever made.
It's an organic soup which was cooking for 4.5 billion years. That same soup on Earth cooked for less than 1 billion years and gave us life. So if I had to guess, I'd say there was a pretty good chance there's something very interesting going on in Europa.
We are in the midst of a revolution. Once thought to be dead and boring, the moons are now known to offer the most exotic real estate in the solar system. Today, it is the moons that beckon us. In the last year alone, scientists have found at least 20 new moons, one of the greatest periods of moon discovery ever. And there's evidence that at least 2 more moons of Jupiter may also have oceans, and with that, the hope of life. Where will we go next? We've got at least 95 worlds to choose from.